What is going on, everybody? Welcome to Schrishzen Thoughts, where I talk about stuff. Shout out to my subscribers. Shout out to anybody new coming across this channel. Comments and feedback are always welcome. If you like what you hear, feel free to subscribe. I'd say if you do hop on board, hit that bell icon, but it doesn't really do anything. So if you do subscribe, you will. I'm trying to be way more consistent, so it should stay in your algorithm, and you should see my videos when they're posted. I just recorded 10 minutes of this video, muted it to try and limit an echo, and completely forgot I muted it. So when I went back to share something now, so I was like, oh, let me switch to I'm still muted. So we will start this over again. Today, happy Sunday. We are discussing biblical slavery, one of my favorite topics to read about and discuss, even with believers, even though I don't do it a whole lot with them, not live, because the majority of people in my life, I'm not trying to shake their faith like that. Like, y'all happy believing what you want to believe. Y'all know what I do, where I stand. Most of you, at least. Most people in my life that matter in any way, shape, or form kind of know where I stand. So if you challenge me, I'm down for it. Or if you're down to have a convo with me, I'm down for it. But this one is an interesting one, and it's one of the ones that keeps me from being a believer, largely because I haven't heard a good answer yet. So the Bible, in my opinion, condones slavery. My opinion is based off what the Bible states, which is that it condones slavery. So I'm not trying to argue with it. I get it that back then it was a thing and people needed it for whatever reason, but for your all-powerful, all-loving being, or if people don't say God is love, for love to say it is okay for you to own another person as property, that doesn't exactly seem to go together. There are other gripes that I have, which I will share eventually, but this video is largely around slavery. This video is around slavery. I will be sharing a conversation that I have with a friend of mine. Only saying that now because it kind of ties into this one in my head, to where the guy I'm going to share, Alan Parr, is a Trinitarian. He's the dude that I'll share a combo that I had with in relation to the same thing. Is not, and he says people who are Trinitarians aren't real Christians, basically. So in my head, I'm like, yeah, that would make sense then as to why this video is so bad. In my head, if you have the Holy Spirit within you, there's certain things that you would and would not do. This video, to me, is one where you wouldn't do this. But then you got my boy who hits me with responses that were like, if you had this within you, you wouldn't do this. But I'm going to start with, to me, the gold from this video. I'm not going to share this, but you'll hear it.
While you are there, this is a difficult and controversial subject, and it's clear that we can make the Bible say anything we want it to say if we take certain verses out of context.
So I share that because he ends his video with this after going through and doing an entire video pulling verses out of context. I say that because this is a topic that I've looked into, and I've done a good dive into this one. So I was like, this is pretty legit, and I'd love to hear how it's explained away. And to this day, I have yet to hear a good one. Maybe somebody who checks this out will be able to provide one, but let's just get it started. We will load up Mr. Alan Parr on slavery. Alan Parr is from The Beat, pretty popular YouTuber. There's a really, really dope book, Does the Bible Condone Slavery, by Dr. Josh Bowen. He's the one who I got a lot of my information from, and largely where the majority of this thought process came from, at least in regards to where the Bible stands on slavery, and how I word even the way I worded it by not just saying, yeah, the Bible condones slavery. No, yes, chattel slavery, the owning of another person as property. Why? Because that's what the Bible says. Not according to Alan, which we'll find out. Let's switch this because I don't like this layout. We'll go with this one. Here we go. Beginning's womp.
Would use the Bible to support slavery. But the question remains, what does the Bible teach on this subject of slavery? That's coming up next on The Beat. Hey everyone, my name is Alan Parr. Thank you all.
Jumping ahead of him, I don't fully argue against his first point. There's a bit of a pushback that I know I gave in my recording I was doing before, so if I remember it, I will throw it in, but I don't largely disagree with the first point.
So much for visiting my channel. Here on The Beat, we release a new video every single Tuesday, and today we are answering the controversial and many times misunderstood question, does the Bible support slavery?
He seems to misunderstand this question. I'm going to lay that out now. You can consider it poisoning the well. I don't think it is, because I'm going to share without really. I'll share, but he's bad.
And so what I want to do is I want to give you 7 facts and show you how slavery in the Bible was very different than the slavery that was practiced in our country. Number 1.
Very different than the slavery that's practiced. I didn't even catch this until just now. He doesn't say that it's not condoned. He just says it's different from the slavery that was practiced here in the country. Like, yes, it was. I'll give you that. But not as different as we might think. We're not going to go into that here. But there were regulations in the antebellum South and the same regulations in the Bible. Couldn't just willy-nilly beat them. Got in trouble for killing them. They did have some kind of rights. Like, it's one of those things where, yeah, it was different, but not wildly different, not way different to where nothing matches up. Like, no, things do still match up. People like to gloss over that.
God did not create slavery, but rather he regulated it. And so just like there were laws about murder and theft and polygamy.
I remember my pushback on this one. We'll let it rock for now.
And divorce. God knew that the hearts of people were evil, and so he had to establish laws that would regulate slavery and ensure the proper treatment of slaves. And so the very fact that there is a law about it at all indicates that God did not approve of it, and it wasn't his perfect will, because God did not establish laws to regulate or limit good, only to regulate evil.
So God established laws only to regulate evil. He had established laws that have to do with mixed fabric. He established laws that have to do with working on Sabbath day. He established laws that said if you were raped and didn't cry out about it, then it didn't happen, basically. So that's an evil, not regulated. But the other ones, mixed fabric, that's what's evil about mixed fabric. What's evil about eating shellfish? What's evil about working on the Sabbath? So this is one of those, he overreaches with his comments. And this is a comment where I think like you're trying to say, oh, God didn't approve of it because he made laws that regulated it. And he only does that for evil things, yet he does it for things that have nothing to do with good or bad. They just are. Mixed fabrics are mixed fabrics.
Number 2, the purpose of slavery in the Bible, as we're getting ready to see, was actually designed to help the poor survive, which was the exact opposite of what was practiced in our country for nearly 400 years. This leads me to my third point, which is that
not much to that point to really go against. Like, cool, you want to say that it was designed to help people? Yes, in a sense, you can argue that one. I'm not going to push back on it. I pushed back the last time I did this, and I didn't even really care for that pushback, so we'll leave it alone.
In the Hebrew culture, slavery was primarily volitional.
So this is where it starts. This is where his downfall, it basically runs for the rest of the video. Primarily volitional. I'll give you that one. Absolutely. I will give you that slavery way back in biblical times was most likely majority, hey, I'm going to put myself into this position because it is my last resort.
So in other words, if a person was too poor to provide.
So this is where he's starting. Read the words that he has on the screen. If any of your fellow Israelites, he says if a person becomes poor and sells themselves to you. Fellow Israelite and a person are two very different things. Shared by Leviticus 25. Let's go. Well, let's let him finish and then we'll go look at it.
for themselves, or if they were in debt, they would oftentimes hire themselves out to someone who was richer who could provide for them or pay off all of their debt. Others would choose to be slaves to ensure that all of their basic needs were met by their master.
Exodus 21, 5-6. So we're both going to look at Leviticus 25 and Exodus 21. Again, like he mentions, when you pull stuff out of context, you can get it to say whatever you want it to say. So in this one, if the servant declares, I love my master and I do not want to go free, yes, they are choosing to stay slave. However, you're missing some context around this one. You're missing context as to why you pulled this one in. Why'd you pull this verse?
Either way, slavery in the Hebrew culture was volitional, which leads me to my fourth point.
Slavery in the Hebrew culture was volitional. In a technical sense, he might not be wrong on that one. But let's look at the verses that he shared. So we'll stop that one. We will share Leviticus. We'll do Leviticus 25 first. What verse did he use? I think he used 25:39. We can read. So I don't want to read the whole thing, but this is largely in relation to Hebrew slaves. The 7th year Jubilee thing applied to Hebrew slaves. These things all apply. Well, let's read it because context is key, right? Then the Lord said to Moses on Mount Sinai, speak to the Israelites and say to them, when you enter the land that I'm giving to you, the land itself must observe the Sabbath to the Lord. For 6 years you may sow your field and prune the vineyard and gather its crops, but in the 7th year there should be a Sabbath, and a complete rest of the land, a Sabbath to the Lord. You are not to sow in your field, but this is whatever. So here you go into the year of Jubilee, which is the 7th, and you shall count all 7 Sabbaths of years, 7 times for 7 years, so that the 7 Sabbaths of years amounts to 49 years. For you are blah, 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 blah. That's whatever. So yes, you're missing context. It's like this plays into the whole year Jubilee, which is the 7th year that you have to release Hebrew slaves. These are laws that apply to Hebrews. If you make a sale to your neighbor or purchase from him, you must not take advantage of each other. So basically it's saying don't charge interest. You buy from your neighbor according to the number of years since the last Jubilee. He is to sell you according to the number of the harvest years remaining. You shall increase the price in a portion greater than the number of years in portion. Where's the part that I want? Advantage of each other. So, all right, this gets to where we were, where he was and what he had shared. So, now if your countryman becomes destitute and cannot support himself among you, then you are to help him as you are a foreigner or a stranger, so that you can continue to live among you, so that he continue to live among you. Do not take any interest or profit from him, but fear your God, that your countryman may live among you. You must not lend him your silver at interest or sell him your food for profit. I am the Lord your God, who brought you out of the land of Egypt to give you the land of Canaan and to be your God. So if your countryman becomes destitute and cannot support himself, countryman. If a countryman among you becomes destitute and sells himself to you, you must not force him into slave labor. Why is there a distinction between regular labor and slave labor? If any slaves that you have are all the same, and if everybody is there voluntarily, why would there be a difference? Let him stay with you as a hired worker. What's the difference between slave labor and hired worker or temporary resident? He is to work for you until the year of Jubilee. He and his children are to be released, and he may return to his clan and to the property of his fathers. So this is speaking to a countryman who sells himself to you. Because the Israelites are my servants, whom I brought out of the land of Egypt, they are not to be sold as slaves. Because the Israelites are my servants, they are not to be sold as slaves. You are not to rule over them harshly, but you shall fear your God. Your men servants and maid servants shall come from the nations around you. Other translations translate this as male and female slaves. His verse was 24:39, right? If your countryman becomes destitute and sells himself to you. But if you go down to 44, it says your male slaves and female slaves, men servants and maid servants shall come from the nations among you, from whom you may purchase them. So these are ones that you're going out and purchasing. They're not selling themselves in. You may also purchase them from the foreigners residing among you, or the clans living around among you who are born in the land. They may become your property. He will later get into people aren't property. You can't rule over anybody because they're not property. But this verse clearly says they may become your property. You leave them to your sons after you to inherit as property. You can make them slaves for life. But as for your brothers, the Israelites, no man may rule harshly over his brother. So you can have them as slaves for life. They are your property. These are your people that you can go out and purchase and pass on to your kids as an inheritance because they are your property. And you can make them slaves for life. But fellow Israelites, you cannot do that too. If a foreigner residing among you prospers, but your countryman dwelling near him becomes destitute and sells himself to the foreigner or to a member of the clan, he retains the right of redemption. After he has sold himself, one of his brothers may redeem him, either his uncle or cousin. So this is saying if a foreigner becomes rich enough to have their own slaves and your fellow Israel sells themselves to them, they can still be redeemed. That's a whole different thing. Now, let's look at the other verse he shared, which is Exodus. What did I do? I'm going to stop that one. So, as you can see there, it's taken out of context, largely focused around Israelites, fellow countrymen, not just anybody. It's not everybody got to go free after the year of Jubilee. Jubilee applied to Israelites, not everybody else. Why? Because later on it says these ones you can go purchase from here and keep them for life. There's no, you've got to let them go at the year after the year of Jubilee. There's no, you've got to have them sell to you based off the years left. Like none of that. They said you can have these ones from your neighbors, keep them for life, pass them on as property to your children. Pretty sure year of Jubilee doesn't apply to them. So that would mean, if it wasn't in this point, it's in the point he's about to make, you don't all get to go after 7 years. But let's look at the other one he shared. Exodus 21. What verse did he use in this? 9. No. Which one did he use in this? Exodus 21, 5-6. So Exodus 21, 5-6. Boom, early. So if you buy a Hebrew servant, he is to serve you for 6 years. If you buy a Hebrew servant, he has to serve you for 6 years. His quote is in relation to the I don't want to go free, which will come after this. But his start is if you buy a Hebrew servant. So this, what he shares as you get to go or you can stay for life under your own choosing is Hebrew servants, or is related. It's related to this. If you buy a Hebrew servant, he'll serve you for 6 years, but in the 7th year, you should go free without paying anything. If he arrived alone, he will leave alone. If he arrived with a wife, she is to leave with him. If his master gives him a wife and bears him sons and daughters, a woman and children shall become her master, and only the man shall belong to her master, and only the man shall go free. So that's basically, it says, if he comes alone, he leaves alone. If you gave him a wife and kids stay because of the property of the masters, dad goes free. But if the servant declares, I love my master and my wife and children, and I do not want to go free, then his master is to bring him to the judges, shall take him to the doorposts, and pierce his ear with an awl, and they shall serve his master for life. So he gets to keep these servants as slaves for life, but only under their choosing because they don't want to leave their kids. This was often presented as a loophole to, hey, I get to have a slave for life without looking like I forced you into this. It's not like I bought you into this. You were able to go free. You just chose to come back because you don't want to leave your kids. I mean, who really would? So, again, the context is in relation to a Hebrew servant that you're releasing after their time is served. So, back to Mr. Parr. We will go back to Mr. Allen. I did not mean to do that. And I get it. I'm not the smoothest with this, but there are people who have references if you really want to hear a much smoother take on this. Back to Alan.
Hey, slavery in the Hebrew culture was volitional, which leads me to my fourth point, which is that kidnapping, according to Exodus chapter 21, in any and all circumstances, was completely and totally outlawed.
So, this is a funny one. Anyone who kidnaps someone is to be put to death. Exodus 21:16. Do I have that up? I do. The funny element to this is they don't seem to link together a captive with kidnapping. Captives are what they took as spoils of war. You go desecrate this entire town, take the women and children. You can keep the women and divvy up, or keep the women who haven't been touched by a man and kill the rest. But the ones that you're keeping and divvying up amongst yourselves are captives. They weren't kidnapped in the sense of you went to town and took them while people were still there. You just went and slaughtered everybody there and kept some of them for yourself. So they're kept against their will. But that wasn't punishable by death because in most cases, people say they're prisoners of war. He doesn't even mention that. He just flat out says, you can't kidnap people. Exodus 21:16 says you can't kidnap people. I'm not going to screen share it, but I will read it. 21:15, whoever strikes his father or mother must surely be put to death. Whoever kidnaps another man must be put to death, whether he sells him or the man is found in his possession. But you can go up to a town and say, hey, you guys come and become our slaves, or we're going to kill all y'all and then keep who we want to keep. But that's not kidnapping people, because that's different. But just, yeah.
And punishable by death. And so this idea that you could take somebody against their will and make them your slave was not only...
I don't have the Bible verse, but there's a full-on verse that says, march up to this town, tell them, hey, come become our slaves, or we're going to kill all y'all, or we're going to war. You can't say we're going to kill all y'all, we're going to war. I think that's taking them against their will. I think when you're given that, I'm going to give you an offer you can't refuse type ultimatum, it's taking you against your will.
Against the law, but it was outside of the will of God. Number 5, slavery was limited to just 6 years. And so the idea...
We just covered this. All slaves were freed after 6 years. His fact is all slaves were freed after 6 years. We just read it. I'm pretty sure he picks that same verse.
Here is that it was never God's heart for the rich to overtake or control the poor. On the contrary, this system was
Exodus 21:2. Let's go look at it. Because Mr. Parr says if you take things out of context, you can make the Bible say whatever you want it to say. And I was like, you know what, Mr. Parr? You are absolutely right. If you do go into the Bible, take something out of context, you can make it say whatever you want it to say. Why? Because that's what cherry picking is. Cherry picking is going in and picking out the parts that you like, discarding the parts that you don't, and then saying, oh my God, this is great. If you buy a Hebrew servant, he is to serve you for 6 years. If you buy a Hebrew servant, that's it. All right, we're done checking in on that one, because Exodus 21:2, if you buy a Hebrew servant, like he has posted here, if you buy a Hebrew servant, he is to serve you for 6 years. So I'm confused, Mr. Parr. How are you saying all when it says Hebrew? How are you equating Hebrew to all when it says Hebrew? Weird.
set up so that slaves or people who were in debt could work off their debt in a safe and loving environment. And then after 6 years, they were not only to go free, but also the master was commanded as an act of kindness to put something in their hands and send them on their way, which was in direct contrast to what has been practiced in our country. Number 6, slave owners were to treat slaves with respect. The Bible says in Leviticus chapter 25 that slave owners were commanded to treat slaves as employees.
Do not make them work as slaves. We just read this. Leviticus 25, 39 to 40. Do not make them work as slaves. They're to be treated as hired workers. But is that slaves? Or is that the Hebrew ones? Is that the Hebrew servants? Is that all, or is it just the Hebrews? Leviticus 25, 39 to 40, I'm pretty sure. Yep. I've looked at this all the time, but I never remember the verses. If a countryman among you becomes destitute and sells himself to you, you must not force him into slave labor. Countryman is often referred to as the Israelites. Countrymen didn't apply to just everybody. Let him stay with you as a hired worker or a temporary resident. He is to work for you until the year of Jubilee. Again, the year of Jubilee only applied to Hebrews. It didn't apply to everybody else. Because the Israelites are my servants. Again, he says, I skipped a verse, which is saying that after he's been released, he can go back to his property of his fathers. But it's because the Israelites are my servants. So this, again, applies to Israelites.
Or hired workers in terms of the type of work that they gave them. Not only this, but if a slave owner was guilty of killing a slave, he would be facing severe punishment himself.
That is a verse that I think a lot of non-believers take and poorly use by saying, oh, you could beat your slaves within an interval of their life and they don't get punished if he doesn't die within a day or two. Not true. You couldn't just up and beat them for anything and everything. And the whole point of setting the rules behind them dying was it would exemplify that you did it less out of punishment and more out of anger. You're not beating them to the point of death if it's just a simple punishment. So he's not wrong on this part.
First of all, they were commanded to maintain the family unity.
This,
so the slaves came to you.
We just read it. Trying to maintain the family unity. We just read it. That they didn't really care. Because if they cared, then it would be no matter what, you Jubilee, whether it's the master that gave the wife or you came in with them, you would leave with them. They were cool breaking up the family. They were cool letting dad leave. If the master gave him the wife and kid and he had kids with that wife, then kids and wife stay because they're the property of the owner, not dad. So maintaining the family unit, you're using half the verse. If he comes alone, he is to go free alone. But if he has a wife and he comes, she is to go with him. Cool. But if he comes alone and the master gives him a wife, you're cherry picking. Here we are, cherry picking again. Why? Because all you have to do is read what, a verse later? Is it a verse later? You stop at 21:3. Let's do it, because I'm gonna go back to sharing it. Why? Because it helps to show that I'm not making this stuff up on my own. We're going to look at it again, because I'm pretty sure all you have to do is read one more verse, maybe two. Maybe two. Exodus. If you buy a Hebrew servant and serve him for 6 years, if he arrived alone, he is to leave alone. If he arrived with a wife, she is to leave with him. Cool, you got that verse. What's the next one say? If his master gives him a wife and she bears him sons or daughters, the woman and the children shall belong to the master, and only the man shall go free. That just completely ruined your narrative. And you chose not to share it. Why? Why would you choose not to share the very next line? The very next line. It's not even like, oh man, you didn't read down like 6 more verses, so you missed this part. Like, nope. You had a whole nother line to read. That's it.
And he was already married with children. After the 6 years were up, he and his wife and his children were to go free, which was in direct contrast to what was happening in our country. Finally, God made it very clear that a master was buying simply the services and not the servant.
This flat out says, for the Israelites belong to me as servants. Israelites. You can make the Bible say whatever you want it to say when you pull verses out of context.
Because it's very clear that no man can own another man. Like,
because again, like I said, I look at this all the time, but I forget verses. I forget them. I forget what they say. I forget what they say. I mix it up a little bit, but then usually I forget exactly what it said. So let's just go look at it, because you can't keep anybody. No, you can own another person, right? That's what you just said. I'm pretty sure that's what I heard. Leviticus. Where is it? Oh, boom, look, I got it highlighted. You may leave them to your sons after you to inherit as property. You can inherit. Give them to your sons as an inheritance, because they are your property. There are other verses that say, if an ox kills one of your slaves or something like that, you're just owed money because the slave is your property. All it takes is reading the verse. All it takes is just reading the verse. But Mr. Allen, you said that they're not property, and the Bible clearly says that they are property. So I'm a little confused there, Alan.
I can own an animal, because all of us were created in the image of God, and all of us belong to God as servants. And number 7, slavery was never based on race. And so nowhere in the Bible does it condone. And
this is super simple. You're not wrong. I don't think it was a race-based thing. It was belief-based. You could buy slaves from your neighbors, from the one I just read is not the translation I generally read, but you can buy your servants from the nations among you. So if they're Israelites, you have to treat them this way. If they're not Israelites, you can keep them forever. If they're Israelites, you have a bit more rules. If they're not Israelites, you can let go of those rules. So is it based on race? Are we going and picking up a race of people? No. But are you going around saying, hey, what do you believe in? Not this? Cool. I could treat you this way if I buy you as a slave. So not race-based, but belief-based.
Enslaving a race of people, rather only individuals, and that on a voluntary basis.
I will say it's not belief-based, because you didn't just enslave them based off their belief, but you did enslave some based off of belief by going to a town and saying, hey, we're taking you over, be our slaves or die. But the rest was just, we're going to regulate how we treat you as my property based on your belief. If you believe this, we'll treat you this way. If you don't believe this, we have to treat you another way.
So does the Bible make concessions for and have laws that regulate and ensure the proper treatment of slaves? I would have to say yes. But does it support the degradation or the mistreatment of slaves that we saw in our country for nearly 400 years?
A little bit.
Absolutely not. If you found this video helpful in any way, feel free to share it with a friend.
This was the end
Also, if you haven't done
that I
so
started
already, I'd
with.
love if you head over to my YouTube channel and subscribe. Check out some of the other videos while you're there. This is a difficult and controversial subject, and it's clear that we can make the Bible say anything we want it to say if we take certain verses out of context. And so I would love to hear your thoughts. Leave them in the comment section below. I'm also going to leave a couple of links that you can look at to get more information on this subject. Hey, thank you all.
That's Alan. That's the beat. He's not the only one. And like, that's the sad part, is he's not the only one to make these arguments. And he's not the only one that just stops reading. My boy who shared a whole 3 links with me didn't read what I wrote, first off. And then none of the links address what I said, and they all do the same thing where they just stop a verse short. A verse short. You pick and choose the ones that you like because you're like, yo, I know slavery is messed up. So I have to find a way to make sure that this book does not say that it's okay. Even though the book says it's okay, I have to find a way to twist these words to say that they're not. Oh, it's an eved, and eved doesn't necessarily mean slave. Read a book on this, Dr. Josh Bowen. Let me look this up quick while we are here. But Dr. Josh Bowen, wonderful book about it. Quoting scholars that are on both sides of the fence that seem to agree. They're like, yo, you got to just suck it up and eat it. The Bible says it's okay with slavery. They were okay with it in that time. And it is what it is. It's one of those things that until I hear better arguments for it, then I can't say that I could ever look past this and just say, yeah, this being is something that's worth believing in and definitely is a loving being, considering they are okay with slavery. Like, it's hard for me to link love and slavery. Hey, you're loving, but you told people that they could own other people. Apparently that's okay. I don't know. And I will quickly, Dr. Josh's book, wonderful book, easy read, and super informative. Does the Old Testament endorse slavery? I could do way better at sharing a book, but copies in my car, I didn't feel like going out to get it. But Alan Parr, you're the first one up. Why? Because I remember your video. I remember your video a lot, and I go back to it and look for my timestamps, and my thoughts haven't changed on any of them. Check out the video yourself. We just watched the whole thing. I didn't stop it. I didn't cut anything out of it. We watched the whole thing. You saw it. We went and fact checked them. If you could do better, I'd love to hear it. Comments and feedback are always welcome. Thank you for checking this out. I hope you enjoyed. I'll be doing more. Again, I will be sharing the conversation that I had. I'm not going to include his name or share any of it, but I'll just sit here and read it to you. And I'll share the links that he had sent, what I asked, what was addressed, what he wrote. It's great. It's greatness. Hope you enjoyed. Hope you enjoy the rest of your Sunday. Go Cowboys. Need to check to see if we're still up. Bye.